What's up, everyone? It's Books and Looks TV. So today I'm going to talk about Mary and the movie Sinners, just like my overall analysis. And so one thing I really like talks about so many aspects of Black and Southern life. And I'm not changing my mind about Michael B. Jordan's performative Blackness. I'll talk about that probably in another video. But I thought to myself, why not look at the movie? So when I was looking at the movie, of course, it had this supernatural theme of it being depicted of 1930s Clarksville, Mississippi. I thought it was interesting how Mary's character projected the tragic mulatto trope. And throughout the movie, you kind of see Mary yearning for like this genuine connection and how this kind of ultimately became her undoing. But Mary's overall predicament of the one drop rule was like a highlight in the movie. For those who aren't from the United States, because I do have viewers who aren't from the United States, the one drop rule was a legal and social construct rigorously enforcing the Jim Crow South. And this rule dictated that any person with even like one drop of African ancestry was considered Black, therefore subjugated. So no matter how fair your skin was or how much white ancestry you possessed, if it was detected that you had any Black ancestry, you pretty much were treated like a second class citizen like other Black people. And so Mary, of course, she wants the privileges of white society, but she also wants connection to the Black community. I feel like a lot of times you see these things happening even in present day. Often I hear those who aren't white passing or white presenting say that white people rejected them and Black people treat them the same. I'm not trying to diminish anyone's experience. However, I have noticed that there are some people who don't try to just equally embrace both sides. There are some people who generally would just go wherever to feel some sense of belonging. I think that is human nature, but I do feel like sometimes whichever side, or at least with Black people, I'll speak for Black people because I'm Black. If you try to go be around white people and they reject you, of course, there's some Black people gonna say, okay, you Black, you cool, whatever, you're mixed, or I rock with you. But it's some people who feel like you were a second choice and therefore they don't feel as genuine. I don't know if that was the case with the people in the movie. I feel like that overall their safety was jeopardized when Mary would come along. And so they acknowledged her and they even allow her in the juke joint. Her presence alone made them unsafe. And I feel like that Mary was so self-absorbed that she didn't look at it in that way. Nonetheless, Mary's existence is very profound, especially her internal conflict, which she is driven by her sense for belonging. Following her mother's death in the movie, she seeks empathy and acceptance from the Black community, and this desire increases, it seems, after the loss of her mother and her perceived abandonment. Mary repeatedly in the movie emphasizes the immense sacrifices that her mother, who was basically quadroon because her father was biracial, made for the Black community. She talks about how her mother was a midwife, specifically delivering Black babies and helping Black women through their own labor. And this raw emotions and like reflections that she depicts in the movie shows that Mary has a deep yearning for validation of love, but also she wants to be respected through the legacy that her mother gave. I don't know if the movie showed so much of her sharing that other than what's going to present itself in the future. Mary pretty much wants a place within the Black community, and she kind of criticizes them a few times about overlooking how they benefited from her mother, but they didn't like show up to her mother's funeral or they didn't mourn her. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they couldn't be around someone who probably was passing. I don't know. I know a lot of times people also get wrapped up into work, and this is just a movie, but I'm just saying, I think a lot of times when you are isolated or you feel like your mother was probably the only person you had, you would come up with those type of reasonings. Mary's mother being a quadroon obviously shows how Mary is basically white passing. She doesn't have as much African ancestry. She has these advantages. This very white passing appearance, coupled with her beauty, grants her a unique advantage and privilege to enter both white and Black spaces, unlike the people she constantly chastises. This ability, however, is still considered a burden for her. It positions her as a vulnerable bridge, a potential target for exploitation, rather than a truly accepted member of either world in regards to Black and white populations. Despite her physical allure and this fleeting mobility that she seems to have, there still is pervasive racial politics of Jim Crow, rendering her beauty as pretty much not a benefit in a way because she's not truly happy. She primarily lies on her husband being financially stable, which Stack acknowledges. But again, she says she's not even happy in her marriage and it wasn't her choice to marry him. So her marrying this wealthy white man for perceived security shows that she has a different desire, yet she's visibly lonely, revealing painful compromises and self betrayals in her struggle for survival within the structures of Jim Crow. Mary's racial ambiguity, while seemingly offering a perilous path of least resistance, thrusts her into a profoundly vulnerable space. The sheer isolation Mary experiences underscores the systemic failure of Jim Crow to allow for multiracial communities or safe spaces where her identity could be genuinely embraced, absent such as a sanctuary. She feels utterly alone. Moreover, Mary is deeply infatuated with Stack, one of the twin brothers. As Stack, though often aggressive and engaging in many outlandish activities, is portrayed as a misunderstood figure as well. And you see times where he shows fear, desire for like his cousin and community to be better. So he threatens his cousin's life, telling him he will not just be like some singer in a juke joint, that he can start a life somewhere else and be a pastor like his father, like an upstanding person in society. And then on the flip side, he wants to also create this space where Black people can enjoy themselves, but he also can make money. Often, though, when people think of the twins, they think of like these gangsters who don't have a heart. But those closest to him, like Mary, they see that he has some vulnerability. And through both of them being misunderstood and even Stack acknowledging that he was parentless, that they forged this deep closeness. Yet they have this blurring of lines through their sexual intimacy, which added a complexity to their bond. So basically, in the movie, they acknowledged that they grew up together and they had a foundational friendship. Yet Mary was basically longing for a love that remained tragically out of reach. Stack basically hit it and quit it and went to Chicago and joined the military. And Stack also becomes like this powerful symbol of genuine connection within the Black community that Mary also desperately craves, which is a stark contrast to the cold, loveless marriage she secured. While Stack employs more direct, perhaps violent means to protect his own, Mary's strategy is one of appeasement and a desperate search for external validation. This profound vulnerability, intensified by her isolated social position, her unfulfilled desires, and her people pleasing nature, is exploited by the film's antagonists, the poor white characters. They aren't merely downtrodden, they're cunning opportunists, desiring an invitation into the very juke joint that represents Mary's emotional and cultural anchor, a vibrant hub of Black community, music, and where Stack presumably resides. And they shed their overt racial animosity and adopt a facade of good common folk, constantly chanting fellowship and love, which is a deceptive lure implied but never authentically proven, and a chilling contrast to the Black community that Mary got to see show love and fellowship, where it was like organically created and lived within the juke joint's very existence and not merely spoken. Nonetheless, Mary was preyed on for her empathy. I think Mary's racial identity and her empathy led for like this desire to be accepted, especially from white society. And it was shown through her being manipulated, honestly. Her longing for white validation is a deeply ingrained and often painful aspect of the mixed race experience, shaped by centuries of racial hierarchy, reinforced by the one drop rule. I feel like Mary had a bit of a misguided hope for true integration or a naive belief in shared humanity, tragically falling for this act. She casually abandons a deep, complicated personal connection and shared history within the Black community, who, despite being gravely endangered, welcomed her with reluctance for the superficial impression of acceptance from white people based on trivial interactions with merely playing a tune. Her failure to adequately vet these individuals to discern their true predatory intention, allegorized through the film's vampire elements, stems directly from her yearning to bridge racial divides and find a place where she's fully seen and accepted. A desire tragically amplified by her liminal racial status and her unfulfilled love for Stack, who represents the authenticity she sacrifices. The supernatural vampires thus serve as a chilling metaphor for the white supremacist system's insidious conception of Black life, culture, and potential. with Mary's misplaced trust turning her into a profound destructive predation. Ultimately, Mary's efforts to act as an olive branch, trying to forge peace or connection between black and white worlds, results in her utter physical and emotional exhaustion through continuous labor, a draining process that ironically mirrors, yet tragically perverts the life giving labor her mother performed for the black community, leaving Mary alone. Mary becomes lost between worlds, her soul literally and metaphorically taken by the very forces she unwittingly invites. By the time she tries to walk back to the juke joint or the black community, it is devastatingly too late. She is no longer merely returning, but forced and to infiltrate the very black love and fellowship she once saw, now irreversibly transformed into an instrument of its destruction. Her tragic trajectory in Sinners is a searing critique of the Jim Crow era's insidious power dynamics, essence consumed, while shockingly intertwining spirits with Stack, ultimately taking his soul, a chilling act that could be seen as a final dark vengeance for his earlier abandonment, completing her tragic destruction of herself and her deepest bond. I also thought it was interesting how this movie kind of reminded me of Lovecraft Country in a sense. There's a black military man who falls in love with a foreign woman or a non-black woman. And when they engage in sex is when the spirit is released and the demons come out and like basically destroy the black man. I think it's ironic how sometimes black men write these narratives themselves. And it's funny that I don't really see black men addressing it or seeing it as if a black woman wrote it, they would say it's interracial relationships, or they would say it's anti just like a black man's autonomy. So again, it's just interesting how black men write this narrative, but I do think it's symbolic to like the spiritual world and that sex is more than just a gesture to say the least. Let me know what you all think in the comments down below. And thank you so much for listening to Books and Look TV. I'll see y'all next time.